about that, a little bit of technical difficulties. Anyhow, I'm Dave Snodgrass with Table Ready Gaming, and today I thought it would be kind of fun to just kind of run through Saltmarsh, which is a new D&D module that just came out. And then probably if this stream goes well, I will be uploading this to my YouTube channel, so if someone has questions, and that way we're not answering the same question just over and over and over and over again, but you can hop in and we're just going to take a look at Saltmarsh by D&D. So if you have any questions about it, please just type in the chat and we'll get things going. So, like I said, I haven't really had much time to look at this. I did look at it a little bit overnight, but I do think we're off to a good start with our little fish man and dog thing, because fish people with otters sounds awesome. So, for those that don't know, Saltmarsh is basically broken down into, like, I think, let's see here, looks like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 independent little adventures that you can watch. And then they also do start off with kind of like the introductory to Saltmarsh, the town. And then what I think, and personally I'm most excited about at the ending, is there's going to be a place where they talk about ships and sea travel and the like. So let's get started. Again, like I said, we're starting off with kind of some nice artwork here that's introducing you to the town of Saltmarsh, which you can use. If anybody has already read Saltmarsh and has some things that are kind of cool that you think we should, point out, please feel free to hop in the chat and let me know. So looks like it's talking about the traditionalist, the loyalist, and so forth, but it looks like there's just going to be a lot of really good kind of quick few charts about stuff going on in Saltmarsh and things like that, getting us started. Personally though, I think I'm going to hop to the end here real quick, because I really would like to see the ship traveling mechanics and things like that. So I believe that was on page 189, and then we'll hop back later in the stream to take a look at some of the adventures and stuff like that. So yes, here is our samples of ships is in here. We're just talking about all the ships that you can have. And one thing that I do really like right off the bat, just kind of at first glance here, is it does look like they kind of give you examples of like what crews should be on a ship, so you have an idea of how many people would be on the ship, and then what kind of stats you should be using for those characters in the ship. So our first ship that we're looking at today is the galley. Galleys are long vessels that rely on sails and sizable rowing crews to move. These ships can carry siege weapons and soldiers of war or transport large amounts of cargo for merchants. No matter the ship's purpose, the crew almost always hires extra protection, since a galleon make large, cargo-rich targets for pirates. A galley has the following features. And then earlier here, it kind of talks about the different steps of the different parts of the ship. Ships have their hull points, which is ship's hull is the basic frame in which the other components are mounted. It has its control, which is a control component is used to steer the ship. Movement, the movement component is the element of the ship that enables it to move, such as the sets of sails or oars or specific speeds. And then weapons are pretty specifically the weapons that are on the ship. So looks like the ship is also basically has some pretty standard stats that you'd see on any other D&D character. For example, they have armor class, which reflects the material used as constructed, and any defensive plating used to augment its toughness. Ships have hit points, so ship component is destroyed and becomes unusable when it drops to 0 hit points. A ship is wrecked if its hull is destroyed, and the ship has no hit dice. The damage threshold, which I kind of think is really cool too, is a ship component is only damaged once a minimum threshold is met. The example they give in here for some of them is like 20. So an attack or something that does less than 20 damage actually does no damage to a ship. And I think that would be things like an arrow or something like that hitting the side of the ship. That's not going to do any thing that's going to affect the ship and how it operates. So anyhow, they start off with the galley. The galley has a strength of 24, dexterity of 4, a constitution of 20, intelligence of 0, wisdom of 0, and charisma of 0. So it looks like pretty much there's the. Hopefully you can see the stats down there of it. But it looks like pretty much the galley, a lot of these ships are simply just going to have basically your first 3 stats. So apparently the Mechanicum was not here to help design ships in D&D Saltmarsh. After the galley, they go on to the keelboat, which is a little bit, looks like it's smaller. They say let's see where they talk about the keelboat. And they also have really good drawings here of all the ships that kind of give you maps and layouts and everything like that. But a keelboat is a gargantuan vehicle. Its creature capacity is 3 crew, 4 passengers. So where does it talk about crew? Because it's talks about size, capacity, ship stat box, how many creatures, and how much cargo you can carry. Creatures include both the crew and the vessels and any passengers that might ride along. Passengers don't generally engage in running the ship. Okay. So then it gives you the example of how many crew are on a keelboat. Yeah, so this is the galley's artwork right here. That's the galley. And for example, the galley has a crew of 80 with 40 passengers and is 150 tons. The galley's example crew is 1 captain, which is the stats of a bandit captain, 5 officers, a first mate, a boatswain, a quartermaster, a surgeon, and a cook, who all have the stats of scouts. And then 42 sailors, who have the stats of commoners, 12 siege engineers, which are guards, and then 20 guards is what Saltmarsh is suggesting you have as the crew of a galley. The keelboat has, or I guess this is on the galley, you can have a naval ram installed, which features an iron naval ram used for attacking other ships. Opening a 10-foot wide, 80-foot long space in the middle of the deck that stretches fore and aft and leads down to the lower deck, which I believe is what this is supposed to be here. So I've noticed that a lot of the ships in Saltmarsh, I think, have more, like, I wouldn't necessarily call them Age of Sail, but more like medieval and a little bit more ancient sailing ship, but I'm not a historical expert, so not 100% on that. It has a railing, a 3-foot rail is built around the deck's perimeter, providing half cover for medium creatures and 3/4 cover for all small creatures. Rowboats. It has 8 rowboats that are stacked in 2 groups of 4 on this deck. Ropes and pulleys can hoist these boats in and out of water. And then the wheel of the ship, which stands at the end that the aft is. And then and I'm probably going to butcher this, but a timpani, which has 2 attached mallets, sits on the aft main deck just before opening to the lower deck. Crew member plays this instrument while sailors at the lower deck rows, and the beat helps synchronize the rower strokes. Okay, cool. So, then some of the other ships it goes on to talk about is it talks about a long ship after the galley. Long ship right here. And they kind of have little stats of the long ship. It says the long ship, on its turn, a long ship can take a move action below, but can't take its action if it has no crew. So long ships, for example, have a armor class of 15 with 300 hit points. Then it has a control helm, which has an armor class of 16 and 50 hit points. And let's see if it has an example crew for a long ship. The long ship's example crew here is 1 captain berserker, 5 other officers or first mate, boatswain, quartermaster, surgeon, cooks, which all should have the stats of berserkers, and then 34 sailors, which all have the stats of commoners. So we go there. Then we go on to the next ship after that is a sailing ship, which looks very similar to like a galleon, things like that. And I think I'm losing. Oh, we'll just keep going here. Then it goes on to a warship. Stats for warships there. And then it goes on to talking about like superior ship upgrades, things that you can add to your ship to make your ship even better. So I think personally, kind of at first glance here, the back part of this book is probably what's going to be most valuable, at least to me, and kind of doing things with like saltwater campaign or ocean travel and stuff like that. It does also talk about like traveling at sea and travel times and things like that, and then also kind of roles that ships can like officers can do on the ship. For example, it looks like the ship's captain often undertakes this activity, producing a map of the ship's progress and helps the crew get back on course if they ever get lost. No ability check is required. Forage, a character casts fishing lines, keeping an eye out for sources of food and making a wisdom survival check when the DM calls for it. You can raise morale. The first mate can apparently raise morale. These are actions that you can do while you're traveling at sea. The first mate can manage the crew's time to grant extended breaks, provide instructions, and generally improve the quality of life on the ship. Once every 24 hours, if the crew's quality score is 3 or lower, the first mate makes a DC 15 Charisma Persuasion check. On a successful check, the crew's score is increased by 1. They do have rules in here for like your crew mutinying against you. At first glance, though, it seems like you're really going to have to screw up really bad to get your crew to mutiny, especially with a DC 15 check. Can raise it by 1, because a mutiny, if the score gets to 0, is when your crew apparently mutinies. Or I think just narratively, you could just have the crew. Yeah, I have not had a chance to play Starfinder yet, so but it's interesting. How so would you say stuff that it reminds you of the Starfinder rules? Like I said, I've not had a chance to look at Starfinder yet. It is on my list, but unfortunately, time in the day just haven't made it to that just yet. And then they have the navigate, which the quartermaster can do. The quartermaster can prevent the ship from becoming lost by making a wisdom survival check when the DM calls for it. I really like that they're including like wisdom and hopefully intelligence checks. When I ran the Nautical campaign, it seems like our dexterity and our strength based classes had a lot to do. So whereas the intelligence and more wisdom based, I struggle coming up with tests for them to make on a ship. So that there is noticing threats, which uses your passive wisdom perception score of the player, character, or crew to determine whether anyone on the ship notices a hidden threat. The crew has a passive wisdom perception score of 10 plus the crew's quality score. So I guess the more better off your crew morale is, the more likely they are to detect threats, which is kind of cool. And then the DM might decide that threats can only be noticed by characters in a specific area of the ship. For example, only characters below deck might have a chance to hear or spot a creature hiding on board. The explanation of the crew and their actions on the ship. Each player can take a role on the ship, and each player can take a role on the pilot captain. Okay, that's cool. I'll definitely have to check that out. I've kind of been wanting to run like secretly. It's not D&D, but on ever since watching The Expanse and reading the Expanse books, I've been really looking for kind of like a sci-fi book where you're running. The players are kind of working together to run a small spaceship, almost like a Firefly or Millennium Falcon size ship, where you have to have multiple crew members on it, but you're not running like a Enterprise or anything from the 40th millennium or anything like that. I think it would be a lot of fun to try to have like these small jobs running around and stuff. So doing that on I think this will give an opportunity to maybe kind of like scratch that itch a little bit with D&D, and hopefully get some kind of cool like just test some things out and see how it works. There's a miniature game called that just came out by the guys that did Blood and Plunder, called Iron and Oak, and it's all going to be like naval combat miniature, like ships of the line basically, which would probably be further along than the ships in Saltmarsh, but I think you can easily make rules for Age of Sail ships, because personally I'd like to see cannons. That's just me, because pirates need cannons and black powder. That's just my personal opinion. So anyhow, but we're kind of getting off into a little rabbit hole there. Some of the other jobs they have two more here. There's repair, which the boatswain can do. At the end of the day, the ship's boatswain can make a strength check using carpenter tools. On a 15 or higher, each damaged component regains hit points equal to 1d6 plus the crew's quality, a minimum of 1 hit point. A component other than a hull that had 0 hit points becomes functional again. So it looks like you're going to be able to repair parts of the ship, but not the ship itself once it starts sinking. So that's kind of cool. And then there's, which I find a little odd at first glance, is that the captain can make stealth checks. The ship's captain can engage in this activity only if the weather conditions restrict visibility. Okay, so restrict visibility, such as in heavy fog, where the ship makes a dexterity check with the bonus equal to the crew's quality score to determine if it can hide. I mean, because I always thought the idea of hiding an Age of Sail ship is a little ridiculous. Like, other than like maybe hiding along the horizon or something like that. Though again, if you've seen Horatio Hornblower, or I think even Master Commander, both great series, they kind of talk about like ships passing each other or looking for each other out in the open ocean. So I think you could have some fun with that. But my first thought is the idea of like Age of Sail ship, like Assassin's Creed Black Flag. There's a little mini mission in there where you have to sneak your ship through a swamp, and there's like English patrolmen like walking along the coast, and the idea that you can like slip this giant like frigate past them and they don't even notice. I thought that scene was a little ridiculous, but I mean, it's a game. It was fun, but still. Then the next part, they go on to talk about like hazards. There's a quick talk about like making group checks to get past those hazards and things like that. And then they go on to talking about determining hazards. Here it says travel by sea is an innately dangerous proposition. When running an ocean adventure, you can select hazards based on the needs of your campaign or generate them randomly. To determine hazards, roll a d20 at the start of each day on the ocean voyage. On a 20, the ship faces a hazard that day, and then use the following two tables to determine the nature of the hazard and the DC of the threat present. The specific corresponding to each of these DC levels are detailed along with each of the following. Alright, so that's kind of cool. Has some random charts for like random hazards that can pop up on you. So you roll a d20. On a 1 through 3, it is a crew conflict. 4 through 6 is a fire, because that's a classic in ocean-going voyages. 7 through 9 is fog. 10 through 12 is an infestation. And then 13 through 20 is a storm. So that's kind of neat. And then I guess once you roll that, you roll the DC, the hazard of the DC. So 1 through 9 is 10, 10 through 17 is 15, 18 through 19 is 20, and then 20 through 25, 20 is a 25 DC check. Okay, and then over here, based on the crew type, it tells you what happens. So, for example, let's say we rolled a d20 and we got the crew conflict, and then we got a crew conflict of like a DC 20. Then a large brawl resulting in several injuries and theft of a prize item has broken out on the ship. Other things that can happen is a minor scuffle, a brawl involving several people, and then murder on the high seas, which is a serious brawl involving most of the crew. Crew conflict checks. The captain can make a charisma check, the first mate can make an intelligence check, and the cook can make an intelligence check and can use the brewer's supplies to boost that, which basically get everybody drunk and figure out what happened. See if you can get someone to talk. Crew conflict results. Okay, so there's total success. The crew's quality score increases by 1 for 1d4 days and the hazard ends. Just a straight success is the hazard ends. A failure, the crew quality score decreases by 1. And a total failure is the crew's quality score decreases by 1, and the crew immediately mutinies. Well, that's drastic. So then we go on to the next stat is fire. Fire at sea can turn a ship into a burned out hulk, its crew slain and forced overboard. If a fire erupts aboard a ship, its officers and crew must make group checks to coordinate efforts to extinguish it. The check's DC is randomly determined or chosen for the fire DC tables. The group check represents 5 minutes of work. The captain's first mate, boatswain, and surgeon each make an ability check as shown on the fire checks table. If no one makes the check for a particular officer, a failure is contributed towards the group check. Also roll a d20 for the crew using its quality score as a modifier for rolling, and compare the check on the DC. Determine how many of the group's checks succeed. The officer and the crews then consult the fire check result table. So back onto more random charts down here for things that can happen with your fire damage. So that's kind of cool. And then so the captain make intelligence check with water vehicles. The first mate gets make charisma check, intimidation. The boatswain strength check with carpenter tools, and the surgeon intelligence check with medicine. So I would, if I was running that, I guess the way I would run that is intelligence is probably trying to find ways to get the fire off the ship and water on the ship. Charisma is again motivating the crew to put out the fire. And keeping them organized, establishing fire lines, stuff like that. Strength check, I think that's just straight up like hauling water, trying to cut rigging, get things out of the way of the fire. And then a surgeon intelligence check. They suggest medicine, so maybe that's treating burns and things like that. Then it goes on to fog. I'm going to jump over to the infestation chart because I'm personally kind of curious to see what kind of infestations you can get here. So, infestations, you can have a minor bug or rat infestation or the common cold. So, it looks like people can get sick. You can get a persistent bug or rat infestation. Okay, so it looks like it is only rats and bugs. You just get different levels of rat and bug infestations. With the 25 being an overwhelming bug or rat infestation / lethal plague. So, that's fun. Ocean environments that you can find. There's blue holes. A blue hole is a circular sinkhole that forms on the bed of the sea in shallow water. The deep blue water of the hole creates stark contrast with the lighter color of the shallow waters that surround it. Blue holes have a diameter of 1d10 times 100 feet or a 1d10 times 100 feet deep. Blue holes are filled with secrets. Many blue holes hide monsters or treasures are shown on the hiding in the blue holes tables. Okay, so then there's a table for things that are hiding in the blue holes. Some examples is like a giant octopus, 1d4 shoals, 2d4 reef sharks, or 1 giant shark. Would be things you would find down in there. Then he goes on to talking about currents. and coral reef. So I mean, this looks to be pretty in depth, talking about different places and things you can encounter on the ocean. There's later they talk about like Eldritch Mist. They talk about the Kraken's grave. So that's kind of interesting. Let's see. When a Kraken die, their bodies often rot on the seafloor. In such cases, the ground absorbs the decaying Kraken's supernatural energy, marking the area with a dark stain in the shape of the Kraken's body. The stain is called a Kraken's grave. When a creature within 30 feet of the Kraken's grave or starts its turn there, the creature must succeed a DC 14 dexterity stealth check or disturbs the grave. The creature disturbs the grave, a tendril made of lightning stretches on the ground and attacks the creature with +7 bonus to hit. On a hit, the target takes 14... so it takes 3d6 lightning damage and must succeed a 14 constitution check, saving throw, or become blinded for the next 2d4 hours. So that's kind of cool. Oh, and then they go on to talk about like magical storms. That might be kind of fun. So I've been toying with the idea in my own world is something kind of fun to do with like tieflings. And I kind of wanted to do like I was a big fan of Warhammer 40k Rogue Trader. And I really like the way they do navigators in that world. And so I thought it would be kind of cool if tieflings could kind of see like the winds of magic, so to speak. And one of the things I thought would be kind of cool is that they could see magical storms. So I'm interested to see the different type of magical storms they have here. And I might even just make those, move them into my actual like land-based campaigns as well. I think they would be kind of fun. But basically it looks like there is a magical storm for every major school of magic. That was the word I was looking for. School of magic and D&D. With necromancy looking kind of like the worst. Ghost howl and whirl in the storm's wind, while the remains of long dead mariners stir in their watery graves. During a storm, 1d4 specters, 2d4 ghouls, and 4d6 zombies emerge from the waves and attack the ship. That's kind of a cool little encounter idea there. Sandbars are neat. I think it's kind of cool how they've included, actual like real world encounters at sea, and then also things that you would only find in a crazy fantasy world like D&D or something like that. But I really like the idea of like storms becoming infused with magic and then becoming worse than just a normal storm. So that'd be kind of cool. Okay, so let's see. They have snow, shipwrecks. That's kind of cool. I mean, obviously you have to have shipwrecks. Whirlpools. And then some random encounters at sea, which is a D100 chart right here. Kind of cool. Some of the random encounters we can have at sea is 3d6 quippers. Which, I mean, probably not too much of a threat to people on the boat. One swarm of quippers. 3d10 dolphins, which kind of would be kind of fun just to see the dolphins, sailing next to your ship. One giant octopus. 1d4 killer whales. 1d6 merfolk. 1d6 giant seahorses. 1d8 giant crabs. 1d4 reef sharks. Now, it's kind of funny. If you ever read the books Lies of Loch Lamora, they have a wolf shark in there, and it's a really cool way they talk about the shark. They talk about how the shark's like a jumper and will like leap out of the water. So every time I use reef sharks, I always kind of use that rule as like you don't actually have to be in the water for them to be a threat for you. Like if you're rowing a boat or something like that, they'll try to like leap over the boat and knock someone off and grab them and pull them into the water. But if you're looking for a fun fantasy series, it's Lies of Loch Lamora. Great books. Highly recommend them. The second one is actually even a pirate-themed book. So absolutely read those books. They're great. You can get a hunter shark, a sagoin, and I'm sorry, I'm probably butchering these names. A cololinth, which is kind of fun. Harpies, marrow, sea hags, bloodhawks, giant shark, and on a 75, one young bronze dragon shows up. And then at 76 through 100, a ship is generated. So you can see other ships at sea. That's kind of fun. Let's see what ships do we generate. Okay, so if we're generating a random ship, we roll a D100. On a 1 through 9, it's a rowboat. On a 10 through 25, it's a keelboat. On a 26 through 38, it's a longship. A 39 through 60, it's a sailing ship. 61 through 79, a galley. And then 80 to 100 is a warship. So, and then every ship has a name. So here we go. We can generate some... I should have brought some dice down here if I was smart. I'll have to do that next time. So we could generate some names. But it looks pretty good. I mean, like some of them you could get... anyone wants to throw out a number. Like, for example, if you did like 9 and 10. Or 9 and... Let's see. It's 2003, so let's just do 2003. So that would be the Zealous Brawler, would be the name of our ship, with a 20 and a 3, which kind of like that name. Be fun. And then they have a crew name generator, which is funny because there is basically an analogy, or an adjective and a noun. So, for example, if we're now at 2004... Okay, 2 and 17. 2 and 17, we get Old Angel would be the crew on 22 and 17. For ship names, 2 and 17 would be the Billis Tide. Well, that's also a pretty good ship's name. Like I really like that. I think that's a pretty good ship name generator. Is pretty solid there. And then you roll a D100 to get the ship's purpose, like why is the ship out at sea. On a 0 through 17, we get it's a cargo ship. 18 to 34, it's a passenger. 35 to 51, it's a fishing ship. 52 to 68 is military. 69 to 85 is piracy. 86 to 95 is mercenary. And then 96 to 100, you get a ghost ship. So we can have our own Pirates of the Caribbean ships out there. So yeah. And then it talks about attitude and race. So you roll a d6. 1 to 2 it's friendly. 3 to 4 it's neutral. And 5 and 6 it would be a hostile ship. And then you get to pick its race. Okay, so races for friendly ships, neutral ships, hostile ships. So you can get a ship full of frost giants, a ship full of kobolds. I'd love to see a ship full of kobolds. I think that would be an adventure in itself. It's just these kobolds at sea. Orcs, hobgoblins, undead. Which, okay, I mean, they talk about like a ghost ship being undead. So I kind of think, I guess you could have like a necromancer or someone like that. Gnolls, and then 61 to 100 is just humans. Just boring old humans. The ship disposition. So you roll a d10. 1 is it's diseased. 2 there's an emergency. 3 help with purpose. 4 is mutiny. 5 is trading. And 6 through 10 is no special disposition. So what is help with purpose? I think the other ones are pretty self-explanatory, but I am not sure what help with purpose means. Ship's crews looking for help with their purpose approach the characters asking for direct aid in a task. For instance, mercenaries ask for help mapping an unexplored area, while a cargo ship's crew asks for characters to serve as guards. Most crews offer compensation in return for the character services, though some might threaten or beg for charity to get help. That's kind of cool. Okay, then neat, they have like a mysterious island generator down here, so we can generate our own mysterious islands. On an alien island, for example, alien islands are inhabited by isolated creatures with ways of life beyond most beings' comprehension. Everything about the culture of the island, form of architecture, to food is unfamiliar and unsettling to outsiders. At your discretion, the inhabitants of the island might speak, read, and write a language all of their own. And you would roll a d4 to figure out the alien island's leader. And you get an aboleth, a beholder, a death slod, or a kraken would be what they suggest. It's kind of fun. And then you would roll for the inhabitants of the island. The reaction. Oh, wow. So the alien island alone is basically 2 pages of charts to generate it. And it looks like pretty much. Then they have the cursed island, which is the same. A sanctum island, a welcoming island, and each island has a little thing about like its leader, goes on to talk about the inhabitants, and then throws out some story hooks for you too. So that's okay. And then Wild Island is kind of fun. So Wild Island is obviously an uninhabited island. All right. Underwater locations that you can find: a bloodhawk roost. 12 bloodhawks hunt the fish in the coves and roost in 6 nests atop a rock formation that peaks above the surface of the water. That's kind of neat. Crystal Cave, Coral Reef, Bleached Reef, Merfolk Mass Grave. That's unsettling. Cove Gorge and a Coral Reef Adventure. And then it looks like they have some drawings. The Sanctum Double. I'll look, see if the Sanctum doubles as a prison. Let's see. Let's go back. Sanctum. The inhabitants of a Sanctum Island use the seas to protect themselves and their property. They simply enjoy the isolation of a remote island affords. The creatures on this island usually lived in permanent structures like abbeys, fortresses, libraries, and towers. I mean, the leader can be an archmage, a lich, a night hag, a noble, the Rakshasa, or the werebears. I mean, I think. Let's see. So some of the reactions you can get, the characters are. I mean, I don't see why you couldn't use it as a prison. I mean, I think that would be really kind of cool. Not to just be a broken record, but there's also another really great scene in the second book of the Gentleman Bastard series, where the people in the boat are going down the Prowler's Passage, I think is what they call it, and there's obviously something on the island that they're going by, and it's doing all this weird magic stuff. And I think that would be really kind of cool, foreshadowing for like a lich or something like that. But some of the things that can happen on the Sanctum Island is characters allowed on the island, but the inhabitants don't allow the characters into any of the buildings. The inhabitants like the characters and give them advice to help them impress the island's leaders. Some unhappy inhabitants believe the characters are taken off the island. They flirt, lie, bribe, and beg to be taken away. The inhabitants attempt to convince the characters to use the island as a base of operations and contribute to the community. The inhabitants hunger for information about the outside world and allow the characters to use news as currency. And then on a 6, you roll on a d6 for these. On a 6, the inhabitants don't trust the characters. All charisma checks are made to influence the inhabitants have disadvantage. So, but yeah, no, I think you could absolutely use the Sanctum Islands as a prison. And actually, I think a prison island would be a really kind of cool idea. You know, especially when you're dealing with like things like, you know, liches, where it's like, we don't know where all his phylacteries are, so we're just going to lock him on this island. So we can't kill him, but at least he can't hurt anyone. obviously do like binding spells so he can't teleport away and stuff like that. That would be kind of a cool adventure. Have like a pirate lich that, he was a pirate captain, and he's buried his phylacteries like all over, like a Caribbean kind of setting. But then like his crew one night mutinies and basically leaves him stranded on an island. And so he's trying to get off this island and trying to convince the players that they should take him with him. And, no, I'm, even though I'm this awful undead creature, I'm still, your buddy. Or he knows about the cursed gold or cursed Aztec gold or whatever. Then we go into our underwater worshippers. And then they have some examples of some, like they have the wreck of the Marshall. And then kind of like here's some like maps. I think that's the wreck of the Marshall that you can use right there as a little adventure. Hook. Looks like they're going to have dragon turtles because, turtle dragons. Dragon turtle bandit. Yeah, so they just kind of have different... okay, this is an adventure. Wreck adventure they've made with... So yeah, you roll a d4. That's cool. So on a d4, you have the encounter is Vecna's Twist, which I say is a 5th level encounter. 2 is the Marrow's Mayhem, which is the 7th level encounter. 3 is the Golem Diver, which is the 11th level encounter. And then 4 is the Dragon Turtle Bandit, which is a 15th level encounter. So there's 4 pre-written wreck adventures in the back, so that's definitely cool. I had not played any original Saltmarsh campaigns or story hooks they've been redoing, so I don't know how much of this, if any of this in the back, is new opposed to recycled content or rehashed content. But so far, the back of the book of Saltmarsh, what we're reviewing right now, I think is absolutely worth the price of the book so far. I'm going to be on for about 15 more minutes or so. So is there anything that people want to see specifically? I'll try to jump over to that. Just let me know in the chat. Otherwise, it looks like we're just kind of going into something like now we're getting into the monster appendixes that they've added in the back. So I just kind of want to do a quick flip through and see if there's any new monsters that I haven't seen in Monsters Manuals, Volo, and stuff like that. So, and I'm really only, because I'm looking so fast, I'm looking for artwork. Looks like there's different bullywogs now. Okay, this thing's kind of creepy looking. There's the Drowned Assassin, which, it kind of looks cool with like the barnacles coming all over him and stuff. That's pretty slick. And there's apparently a disease called blue rot. This disease targets humanoids. While afflicted with blue rot, the victim grows grotesque blue boils all over their face and back. This disease is carried by the undead, including the drowned ones. The victims most often acquire it through wounds caused by infected creatures, so zombies. The disease boils manifest in 1d4 hours, causing the victim's constitution and charisma scores to decrease by 1d4 each to a minimum of 3. This is quickly followed by a fever and tingling in the extremities. An infected creature is vulnerable to radiant damage and gains the ability to breathe underwater. That's kind of cool. At the end of each long rest, the infected creature makes a DC 12 Constitution saving throw. On a success, the victim regains 1 point of Constitution, 1 point of Charisma, lost to the disease. If the infected creature regains all points lost to disease, it is cured. Other effects that raise the victim's ability score do not cure the disease. On a failed saving throw, the victim takes 18 4d8 necrotic damage as the boils burst and spread. The creature reduces 0 hit points by this damage, cannot regain hit points until the disease is cured. Thus, it can be stabilized as normal. Well, that's gross, but kind of neat. Giant sea eels, harpy matriarchs, always fun. Looks like they have some new colith. That's kind of a I don't remember seeing that in another. Hey, lawn hoppers, how you doing, Isaac? We are geeking out tonight with Ghost of Saltmarsh, and we'll be on here for about 13 more minutes. Our old Kipper swarms are back because there's water. Why not? And these things are the Loacath, I think, which are new, and probably my favorite monster that they've introduced so far in the Saltmarsh books. Does it talk about the Loacath at all? Like their backstories, cultures, stuff like that? We'll have to look that up before we call it a night. Some new pirate stats, which is kind of cool. A deck wizard. Okay, so a deck wizard's cantrips or friends, mage hands, ray of frost. And then it has 4 slots for first level spells with disguise self, fog cloud, mage armor, and witch bolt. 3 slots at second level with Gust of Winds, Melf's Acid Arrow, and Misty Step. So they have a challenge rating of 1. But that is pretty cool. I'm running currently, Tomb of Annihilation, but a heavily edited version of it. I don't know if I could actually go down into the tomb, but I just think the content of Chult's so cool. So I'm actually really excited about all the nautical adventures, because being right there on the coast, I think there's definitely ample opportunities for the party to go back to sea if they ever wanted to do that. Well, that's kind of cool. They got the that's very Piratey of the Caribbean artwork right there, with a bunch of skeletons climbing some old ancient statue, or like stepped temple is kind of what I'm looking for. Word I'm looking for there. A scum, I guess is how you would say that. That looks like that's a new monster. Which is a challenge rating of 5. Let's see here. Anything cool? Water dependency. The scum takes 1d12 acid damage every 10 minutes it goes without exposure to water. Okay, so let's see. What is the scum? Scum. Several poor souls around the styes have succumbed to an aboleth's magic through its disease-bearing touch, transforming into creatures called scum. They barely resemble their past forms, their skin turning slimy and translucent, while their limbs warp to resemble those of deep-sea oddities. The change makes them dependent on water, which they must immerse themselves in regularly, lest they experience painful and potentially lethal skin eruptions. The scum are bound to the aboleth masters, and not just by their cursed state, but by psychic bond that compels them to serve in every sinister whim. Swarm of rock grubs. Okay, so that's all the monsters. Look like most of the monsters in this book are going to come for the adventures in it. So I want to look up real quick and figure out who these new fish people are. So let's see if we can find more out about our fish friend with his otter dog, which is, again, right on the cover. That guy. I want to know more about that guy. Is there an appendix? No, damn it. So we're just kind of going to be looking through. I was just curious if they had any sort of like backstory or talked about them. Yeah. Oh, you like the picture of the scum more? I don't know. I just have a soft spot in my heart for otters, I think. So the idea that there is I think it's more not so much the fish man, but the fact that he has an otter and he's using an otter as a dog, or I guess that might be a seal. But anyhow, he's got some little sea critter buddy that hangs out with him. So let's look through here. Okay, so they give you like a nice little map of Saltmarsh, which I really I'm actually kind of surprised at how many of these maps is not the colored looking maps like oh, that's fun. Some lizard men hanging out, having a nice snack dinner. Okay, well then it looks like the scum probably then got a boost in this edition because they absolutely look like they were. So you said CR and 3 was only 2. What's the scum CR in here? I'm pretty sure it was higher than 2. Yeah, their challenge rating's 5, so they definitely got a boost. But yeah, no, the scum are pretty. That's pretty cool. I like the backstory. But also the skeletal swarm sounds kind of fun too. There was an old not really, I guess not old, but there was a game company that was around for like a hot second and then they went under, came War Games Factory, and they had really cool, some of their miniatures were really cool, and I really don't like to diss like model makers and stuff like that, but golly, they had the worst skeleton kit I had ever tried to assemble. These skeletons, first off, they were true 28, so they were to scale of what a human skeleton would be at, not heroic scale or anything like that. So if you're familiar with miniatures, like Warhammer is more heroic, while historical would be true 28. So they're super fiddly, right? I mean, tiny. Like you would use clippers to cut these things off the sprue, and it would just break the bone. But like their feet were separate. And I mean, trying to glue on the skeleton's feet, that was impossible. We had a kit that we bought, because I mean, you could get like, I think it was like 40 skeletons for like $20. Like, I mean, it was a hell of a deal. But my buddy, Walter, bought the kit, and I was like, okay, awesome. And then he gave up on it, but he's not what I would describe as a hobbyist. So I was like, okay, just because Walter gave up doesn't mean it's a bad kit. Then he gave it to me, and I think I built 2 as actual skeletons, and then I used 5 or 6 as like casualty markers, where I'm like, here's just a pile of bones on a base because I'm not building the skeleton. And then I gave it up, and I think I gave it off to my buddy Robert, at which case I think he says it's still sitting in the bottom of his bits box or his shelf of shame. He has never actually got around to finish building those skeletons. So, but anyhow, when I see monsters like skeleton swarms, they talk about how they're just like this pile of like bones. I'm like, oh, I wish I kept that kit, because that would be a really nice kit. Because I mean, all the bones were individually placed, so you could just, if you just wanted to make like a base with just a mass of bones, it was an awesome kit for that. If you ever wanted to like make terrain with like skeletons and stuff like that, it was great. But if you ever tried to like assemble these as like a standing skeleton warrior, I don't know how you did it, other than like the patience of more patience than I apparently have. So, yeah. And there was also, I gotta look too. Do you remember what the D&D monster was? Like a skeleton snake, where it was like a bunch of rib cages, and then had the skull on the end. I think it was in the original Tomb of Horrors or, well, I'm sorry, not the original Tomb of Horrors, but the Tomb of Horrors they did for 4th edition is the first time I remember seeing that monster. Ah, there's our... Oh, magic items. Let's see what magic items we can get in here. There's the Charm of Plant Command. Bone Nagas, yes. Pretty sure they were Bone Nagas, but they weren't, because I think in Tomb of Annihilation now, the Nagas are supposed to be good. So I guess these would have been like undead Nagas. So obviously not good. So I'm just going to take a quick drink of water. Okay, so let's we'll wrap this up by probably looking at these magic items that we can get in here. The magic items introduced in this book are detailed here in alphabetical order. The adventure in which an item appears is given at the end of the description. Okay, so there's the Charm of Plant Command, which is a wondrous item, rare. This fist-sized charm is made from a bundle of dried plant stems wrapped around a silver thread, hung on a leather thong. It is typically worn around the neck and attached to the belt. The charm has 3 charges. While you bear this charm, you can expend 1 charge as an action to cast Speak with Plant spell. For the duration of the spell, you also have advantage on charisma checks made to influence the behavior, the demeanor, and attitude of plants. The charm regains all expended charges at dawn each day. Okay. I mean, that's kind of fun. Speak with animals, speak with plants have always been spells that I've personally struggled with because... So, like, and this is just, again, my opinion, but I think you have some, like, if you have animals, like, if I go talk to a cow, right, and this cow is supposed to be, like, is apparently a sentient creature that I just never was able to understand before, I think that opens up real ethical concerns next time I eat a hamburger. So, personally, I've always struggled with Speak with Animals as a spell. I've always tried to just make it as if, like, you can have a really well-trained animal, or you can get, like, senses of feelings from this animal, but it's not like you can carry on a conversation with it. But again, going down a rabbit hole. And then, similar kind of thing with Speak with Plants, because, I mean, I don't know what a tree can tell you. But, you know, whatever, there's dragons and magic, so let's not get too critical here. Cursed Luck Stone. This flat gray and black river stone is inscribed with an unknown arcane symbol and feels cool to the touch. While carrying the stone, you gain advantage on ability check of your choice. The stone can't be used this way again until the next dawn. Okay, but it's a cursed item. This item is cursed. Attuning to it curses you until you are targeted by the removed curse spell or similar magic. As long as you remain cursed, you cannot discard the stone, which immediately teleports back into your pocket or pack. After you use the stone's magic, your next 2 ability checks are made with disadvantage. Well, that's not the worst if you time that well. Okay, next is the Helm of Underwater Action. Okay, so it's a brass helmet. So basically, it's a diving helmet. Oh, looks like Live is telling me that it's going to kick me off here in less than a minute now, so we should start wrapping this up. There's the Pipe of Remembrance, the Pressure Capsule, and Selicuffin's Worshipping Statuette. Final enemy. Alright, so we're getting kicked off here in a minute. Apparently I didn't realize Instagram only lets you stream for an hour before they say peace out. So if everything goes right and they set this all up correctly, I am going to try to upload this stream to my YouTube channel. You can go to youtube.com, look for Table Ready Gaming. I just started this YouTube channel. It's just where I go around and talk about a lot of D&D content. Some of the things they have there is how to make like cheap miniatures, how to make monster tokens, and thanks for everybody that tuned in and watched. Again, so far, at first glance, I think Saltmarsh is an outstanding book. Definitely worth it. Again, but I'm a little biased because I absolutely love nautical adventures. So far, I think this is the strongest of the 5th edition expansions. So I would encourage you to pick it up. Again, I also got the alternative book cover because sweet Lovecraftian monster opposed to 3 guys in a boat. So thanks for watching. Have a wonderful night, and I will see you all later. Take care.